I'm Barbara Ingram, 62 years old, and this is the story of how I lost my son but found myself. 3 weeks after my son Thomas died in a car accident, his wife Michelle threw me out of the house I'd called home for 15 years. When I begged her to reconsider, she waved a deed in my face and sneered, "Find your name on this, I'll wait." So I left, carrying my life in 2 suitcases. But days later, she showed up at the motel where I was staying with a label maker, pressed a sticker reading "Visitor" onto my jacket, and laughed, "Still can't find your name anywhere that matters, can you?" What she didn't know was that I had already set something in motion that would make her wish she'd never knocked on my door. Before I reveal how a grieving mother turned the tables on the cruelest daughter-in-law imaginable, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you truly connect with this story. I'd love to know where you're watching from and what time it is there. Let me take you back to that October morning when everything changed. The call came at 5:47 a.m. on October 3rd. I remember the exact time because I'd been staring at my alarm clock, unable to sleep, thinking about calling Thomas to wish him luck on his big presentation that day. "Mrs. Ingram, this is Denver General Hospital. Your son Thomas has been in an accident." The drive to the hospital was a blur. All I could think about was the last time we'd spoken, just 2 days earlier when he'd stopped by with groceries, insisting I didn't need to shop for myself anymore. "Mom, let me take care of you for once," he'd said, that crooked smile lighting up his face. When I burst through the emergency room doors, Michelle was already there, blocking my path to the trauma bay. Her perfectly styled blonde hair hadn't moved an inch despite the early hour. "He's asking for me, not you," she said, her voice cold as winter frost. "I'm his wife. You can wait out here." "Michelle, please. He's my son." "And I'm his next of kin now." She turned to the nurse. "Family only." The nurse looked uncomfortable but nodded. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Immediate family has priority." For 20 minutes, I paced that waiting room like a caged animal, pressing my face against the small window in the door, trying to catch a glimpse of my boy. Finally, a different nurse took pity on me. "Quick," she whispered. "His wife stepped out to make a call." Thomas lay surrounded by machines, his face swollen beyond recognition. But his eyes, those were still my baby's eyes. He grabbed my hand with surprising strength. "Mom," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the ventilator. "Check. The trust. Mom. Harold has—" "Thomas? What trust? What are you—" "Promise me. Check the—" "What the hell are you doing in here?" Michelle's shriek cut through the air. "Get out! Security!" Those were the last words I heard my son speak. He passed away 40 minutes later while Michelle stood guard, ensuring I couldn't get close enough to hold his hand. The nurse later told me he'd been asking for me the whole time, but Michelle had insisted he was confused from the medication. As I sat in that cold waiting room, watching strangers comfort Michelle while she played the grieving widow, I kept hearing his words. Check the trust. What trust? And who was Harold? The funeral was held 6 days later at Riverside Memorial Chapel. Michelle had taken control of every detail, from the flowers to the music to, apparently, the seating arrangement. When I arrived at what should have been my son's final goodbye, an usher, clearly briefed by Michelle, directed me to the 3rd row. "I'm his mother," I said quietly, pointing to the front row where Michelle sat with her family. "I'm sorry, ma'am. The immediate family has requested this arrangement." Immediate family. There was that phrase again, like a knife twisting in my gut. I'd given birth to Thomas, raised him alone after his father left, worked 2 jobs to put him through college, but somehow I wasn't immediate family anymore. As I took my assigned seat behind Michelle's cousins, whom Thomas had met maybe twice, I noticed Harold Brennan, our old family friend and Thomas's godfather, sitting in the back row. He was a lawyer, I remembered, estate planning specifically. He caught my eye and gave me a look I couldn't quite read. Concern mixed with something else. Urgency, maybe? The service had barely begun when Michelle stood up to give the eulogy. She spoke for 20 minutes about their perfect marriage and how Thomas had finally found real family with her. Not once did she mention me. Not once did she acknowledge the woman who'd raised the man she claimed to love. But the real humiliation came during the reception. I was standing near Thomas's casket, finally getting a moment alone with my son, when Michelle appeared beside me with something in her hand. "Barbara," she said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear, "I've been thinking. Since you seem confused about your role here, I thought this might help." She pulled out a label maker, the kind you'd use for organizing files, and before I could react, she'd printed out a label and pressed it firmly onto my black jacket. Visitor. The word stared back at me in bold black letters against white adhesive. "There," Michelle announced with a satisfied smile. "Now everyone knows exactly where you stand. Visitors should really stay in the back, don't you think?" The room went silent. 30 pairs of eyes turned to stare at the spectacle of a mother being branded an outsider at her own son's funeral. Some guests looked horrified, others uncomfortable, but no one said a word. Michelle's family actually smirked. "Still can't find your name anywhere important, can you, Barbara?" Michelle continued, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "Not on the house deed, not on the bank accounts, not on anything that matters. Thomas made sure of that before he died. He knew you'd try to take everything." My hands shook as I reached for the label, but Michelle grabbed my wrist. "Leave it on. It's accurate, isn't it?" Harold Brennan suddenly appeared at my elbow. "That's enough, Michelle," he said quietly but firmly. "This is neither the time nor the place." Michelle laughed. "Oh, Harold, still protecting poor Barbara? Thomas told me all about how you've been enabling her for years. Well, that stops now. This is my house now, my family, my rules." As she strutted away, Harold leaned close to my ear. "Don't react. Not here. Come see me next week. There are things you need to know." But I couldn't wait a week, because that very night, Michelle would make her next move. The morning after the funeral, I woke to Michelle standing in my bedroom doorway, Thomas's childhood room that I'd been living in since my retirement 3 years ago, when Thomas insisted I move in to save money. "You need to be out by noon," she announced, tossing 2 empty suitcases onto my bed. "Michelle, please. I just buried my son yesterday. Can't this wait?" She pulled a document from her designer purse and waved it in my face like a victory flag. "See this? This is the deed to this house. Thomas transferred it to me 6 months ago. My name, Michelle Foster Ingram, right there in black and white." She shoved the paper closer. "Go ahead. Find your name. I'll wait." I scanned the document, my heart sinking. There it was, a quitclaim deed dated April 2024, signed by Thomas, transferring sole ownership to Michelle. "But Thomas told me I could live here as long as I needed." "Thomas is dead." The words were sharp, cruel. "And I want you out. 2 hours, Barbara. That's generous, considering you're technically trespassing." "Where am I supposed to go?" "Not my problem. Maybe you should have thought about that before spending your whole retirement savings on cruise tickets and shopping sprees." I wanted to scream that I'd never taken a cruise in my life, that my shopping sprees were trips to Walmart for groceries, but I knew it wouldn't matter. Michelle had already crafted her narrative. As I packed my life into those suitcases, photo albums, Thomas's baby shoes, his college graduation picture, Michelle stood in the doorway, supervising like a prison guard. When I reached for Thomas's old baseball trophy from high school, she snatched it away. "That stays. Everything in this house except your personal clothing belongs to me now." By 11:30, I was standing on the front lawn with 2 suitcases and 3 cardboard boxes, waiting for the Uber I'd called. The neighbors were watching from their windows, Mrs. Chen from across the street, the Johnsons from next door. They'd known Thomas since he was 5. They'd watched him learn to ride his bike on this very street. Michelle made sure they all got a good show. She stood on the porch, arms crossed, tapping her watch theatrically. 20 more minutes, Barbara, then I'm calling the police." Mrs. Chen finally came over, tears in her eyes. "Barbara, this isn't right. Thomas would never—" "Thomas did exactly what he wanted," Michelle interrupted loudly. "He protected his assets from a manipulative mother who bled him dry for years. Everyone here knows how much money he gave you, Barbara. The handouts stop now." As my Uber pulled up, I made one last attempt. "Michelle, I'm not asking for money, just time to find a place. Riverside Motel on Colfax has weekly rates," she called out as I struggled to load my boxes. Perfect for someone of your means. The driver helped me with my bags, shooting confused glances between me and Michelle. As we pulled away, I saw her in the rearview mirror, already on her phone, probably posting on Facebook about the toxic mother-in-law she'd finally gotten rid of. But as I sat in that Uber, heading to a motel that rented by the hour, I remembered Thomas's dying words. Check the trust. Harold. I needed to call Harold, but first, I needed to survive the night. The Riverside Motel was everything Michelle knew it would be. Water-stained ceilings, cigarette burns on the furniture, and the constant sound of arguments through paper-thin walls. At $240 a week, it was all I could afford on my Social Security check. That first night, I sat on the edge of the lumpy bed, still wearing my funeral dress because I couldn't bear to change. The room smelled like old smoke and broken dreams. This was my life now. A 62-year-old woman with 2 suitcases and a son who'd apparently signed away my future 6 months before dying. I kept replaying our last conversations, searching for signs. Had Thomas really wanted me gone? Just 3 weeks ago, he'd brought me breakfast in bed for my birthday. "You deserve to be taken care of, Mom," he'd said. "You've done enough taking care of everyone else." By day 3, the loneliness was suffocating. I'd called Harold's office twice, but his secretary said he was in court all week. I'd left messages that probably sounded desperate because they were. Then I made the mistake of checking Facebook. Michelle had posted a photo of herself in my kitchen, Thomas's kitchen, with the caption, "Finally free from toxic relationships. Sometimes you have to protect your peace, even from family." #boundaries, toxic mothers, in-law, and new beginnings. The comments were a knife to my heart. Her friends rallied around her, sharing their own stories of difficult mothers-in-law. Someone wrote, "Thomas would be so proud of you for standing up for yourself." Another said, "You gave her more chances than she deserved." But the worst part was seeing people I knew, neighbors, Thomas's co-workers, liking her post. Had she convinced everyone I was some kind of monster? On day 5, I nearly gave up entirely. I'd been living on vending machine crackers and tap water, too ashamed to go to the grocery store where people might recognize me. The woman who'd raised Thomas Ingram, reduced to this. I stared at the sleeping pills I took for my insomnia and wondered if taking them all would be easier than facing another day. That's when Janet knocked on my door. Janet Miller had been my friend since Thomas was in elementary school. Our boys had played Little League together. She stood there with a casserole dish and tears in her eyes. "Barbara Ingram, you open this door right now." She took one look at the room, at me, and pulled me into a fierce hug. "I know what Michelle's been saying. It's all lies, and anyone with half a brain knows it." As we ate her homemade lasagna on paper plates, Janet pulled something from her purse. "I went to the house yesterday, told Michelle I was picking up the donations for the church rummage sale. She was so eager to get rid of Thomas's things she didn't even supervise. I found this in his home office hidden inside a book. It was a small USB drive labeled, 'For Mom, Emergency Only.' My hands trembled as I took it. "Janet, I don't even have a computer here." "Then we're going to mine, right now." "And Barbara?" She squeezed my hand. "Thomas loved you. Whatever's on that drive, whatever's happening, don't you dare believe otherwise." As we drove to Janet's house, I held that USB drive like a lifeline. Maybe, just maybe, my son had left me more than just dying words about a trust I didn't understand. I know many of you watching have probably experienced the pain of losing someone you love. Or maybe you've dealt with family members who showed their true colors after a death. If this story is touching your heart, please leave a comment below. I read every single one, and it means the world to connect with all of you who understand this kind of pain. And please, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button so you won't miss what's coming next. Trust me, you're going to want to see what Michelle faces when the truth finally comes out. The USB drive Thomas left behind? It changed everything. Let me show you what we found. Janet's laptop took forever to boot up, or maybe it just felt that way because my heart was racing. When I finally inserted the USB drive, a single video file appeared. "Mom, watch this alone. October 2024. October 2024. He'd recorded this just weeks before his death. Thomas's face filled the screen, and I had to pause immediately, overwhelmed by seeing him alive again. He looked tired, older than his 38 years, with dark circles under his eyes I hadn't noticed in person. Mom, if you're watching this, something's happened to me, and Michelle has probably already started her plan. My blood ran cold. Janet grabbed my hand as Thomas continued. I need you to know the truth. In March, I discovered Michelle has been having an affair since 2019. 5 years, Mom. 5 years of lies. He held up a stack of printed emails and photos. Private investigator confirmed it. Her personal trainer, Derek Walsh, the man I was paying $200 an hour to keep my wife happy and healthy. The screen shifted to documents, credit card statements, text messages, even photos of Michelle and Derek entering a hotel together. But that's not the worst part, Thomas continued, his voice breaking. I found out she's been slowly poisoning me. Small doses of antifreeze in my protein shakes, not enough to kill me quickly, just enough to make me sick, weak. She wanted me debilitated so she could get power of attorney, control everything. Janet gasped. I couldn't breathe. I have proof. Medical records showing ethylene glycol in my system. The doctors thought it was accidental exposure, but I knew better. That's when I made my move. The video shifted to show legal documents. 6 months ago, I created an irrevocable living trust with Harold Brennan's help. Everything, the house, my investments, my life insurance, it's all in the trust. And Mom, you're the primary beneficiary and trustee, not Michelle. That deed she has, it's fake. I gave her a quitclaim deed to a property that was already transferred to the trust. Legally, she owns nothing. Thomas leaned closer to the camera. I've been pretending to be weaker than I am, letting her think her plan is working while Harold and I documented everything. But Mom, if something happens to me before I can expose her, you need to act fast. She'll try to sell everything before you figure it out. He pulled out another document. This is the trust agreement. Harold has the original, but I'm showing you the key parts. Look. He pointed to highlighted sections. Upon my death or incapacitation, you become the sole trustee with full control. Michelle gets nothing unless you decide otherwise, and given what she's done, I'm betting you won't. There's more evidence in Harold's safe. Police reports I never filed, recordings of her discussing her plans with Derek, even a confession she doesn't know I have. I've been wearing a wire for 3 months. Thomas's eyes filled with tears. Mom, I'm so sorry. I should have told you, but I needed her to believe she was winning. If she knew you were aware, she might have hurt you too. The way she's treated you these past months, making you feel unwelcome in your own home, it was all part of her plan to isolate me from anyone who might help. If I'm dead when you see this, know that I love you more than words can say. You gave up everything for me, and I've made sure you'll be taken care of. The trust has enough to keep you comfortable for the rest of your life. The house is yours. Everything is yours. Call Harold immediately. Tell him Thomas said to execute Project Restore. He'll know what to do. And Mom, don't confront Michelle alone. She's dangerous. Let the law handle her. The video ended with Thomas reaching toward the camera. I love you, Mom. Always have, always will. Now go get justice for both of us. Janet and I sat in stunned silence for a full minute before she whispered, We need to call Harold. Now. But I was already dialing, my hands shaking with rage and relief in equal measure. My son hadn't abandoned me. He'd been protecting me all along. Harold Brennan's office was exactly as I remembered from years ago when he'd helped me with my divorce. Walls lined with law books, that same photo of him and Thomas at Thomas's college graduation, and the comforting smell of old leather and coffee. But Harold himself looked like he'd aged a decade in the past week. Barbara, thank God you called, he said, pulling me into a brief hug before immediately locking his office door. I've been trying to reach you, but Michelle told everyone you'd left town. Harold, the video. Thomas said to execute Project Restore? His face transformed from worried to determined. So you found it. Good. Sit down. We have a lot to cover and not much time. He pulled out a thick folder marked Ingram Living Trust, Confidential, and spread its contents across his desk. Everything Thomas said in that video is true. The house, his investment accounts, his life insurance, it's all held in an irrevocable living trust established January 15th, 2024. You are the sole trustee upon his death. But Michelle has a deed, a worthless piece of paper. Harold pulled out another document. Look at the dates. Thomas transferred the property to the trust on January 20th. The quitclaim deed he gave Michelle on April 1st. He was transferring property he no longer owned. Legally, it's meaningless. Can we prove she knew about the trust? Harold's expression darkened. That's where it gets interesting. I have recordings of Michelle from March discussing with her lawyer how to break the trust after Thomas dies. She knew about it, Barbara. She knew and thought she could contest it after he was gone. But why didn't she? Because she doesn't know you're the trustee. Thomas listed the trustee as B. Ingram in all the public filings. She assumes it's him. Brian Ingram, a fictitious person we created for exactly this purpose. She's been waiting for Brian to surface so she can challenge the trust's validity. My mind was spinning. So she thinks she owns the house free and clear? Exactly. And here's the kicker. Harold pulled out another document. She's already listed it for sale. Closing is scheduled in 6 days. She's trying to liquidate everything before Brian appears. Can she do that? Not legally, no. But if the buyer is unaware of the trust, if the title company doesn't catch it, she could complete the sale fraudulently. Then we'd have to sue to get the house back, which could take months. So what do we do? Harold leaned back, a slight smile playing at his lips. We could file an emergency injunction today, stop the sale immediately. But Barbara, Thomas had a different plan. He wanted Michelle to fully commit to the fraud, to be caught red-handed in front of witnesses. Project Restore? Exactly. We let her continue with the sale, but we show up at closing with the trust documents, the police, and the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. See, selling property you don't own across state lines, the buyer is from Texas. That's federal wire fraud. Combined with the attempted murder evidence Thomas compiled, she's looking at 25 to life. My hands were trembling, but not from fear anymore, from anticipation. What about the poisoning? Do we have enough proof? Harold pulled out a medical file. 3 different toxicology reports showing ethylene glycol. Thomas's recorded confession from Derek Walsh admitting Michelle asked him to help make Thomas sick. And here's the coup de grace. He produced a receipt. Michelle purchased antifreeze from 3 different auto shops, paid cash, but we have security footage from all 3 stores. My God, she really tried to kill him. She did more than try, Barbara. Harold's voice was gentle but firm. The levels in his system suggest she succeeded. The car accident might have been the final cause, but Thomas was dying already. The medical examiner just didn't know to look for poisoning. I felt the rage building, pure and clean. When do we strike? The closing is Monday at 2 p.m. But Barbara, I need you to do something difficult until then. Pretend you know nothing. Let Michelle think she's won. Can you do that? I thought about my son, fighting alone to protect me. Harold, I can do anything if it means justice for Thomas. Good, because she's about to make one more mistake, and we need to let her. 2 days after meeting Harold, I was buying groceries at King Soopers when I heard her voice behind me. Barbara? Oh my goodness, is that you? Michelle stood there in her designer workout clothes, her shopping cart full of organic vegetables and expensive wine. She was speaking loudly, performatively, making sure other shoppers could hear. I've been so worried about you, living in that awful motel. You know, if you'd just been reasonable about everything, it didn't have to be this way. I gripped my cart handle, remembering Harold's words. Let her think she's won. Hello, Michelle. Oh, honey, you look terrible. Are you eating properly? She reached into her purse and pulled out a $20 bill, pressing it into my hand as several customers watched. Here, get yourself a hot meal. I know Social Security doesn't go very far. The humiliation burned, but I took the money. Let her play her game. Actually, Michelle continued, her voice dripping with false concern, I'm having a little gathering on Saturday. A celebration of Thomas's life, very intimate, just close friends and family. You should come." A celebration? My son had been dead for 2 weeks. "I'm sure you'd love to see the house one more time," she added. "As a visitor, of course." There it was, the real reason for the invitation. Saturday arrived gray and drizzling, matching my mood as I stood on the porch of what used to be my home. Michelle had redecorated already. Thomas's football trophies gone, his photos removed, replaced with modern art and pictures of her and Derek from their gym. "Barbara!" She greeted me like we were old friends, loud enough for her guests to hear. "Everyone, Thomas's mother is here. Be nice to her. She's having a hard time adjusting to her new circumstances." The label maker appeared again, that same white sticker, Visitor. But this time, she didn't just stick it on my jacket. She made a show of it, gathering everyone's attention first. "We're all wearing name tags today," she announced, though I noticed no one else had one. "Barbara, since you're having trouble remembering your place, I made you a special one." She pressed it onto my chest, patting it firmly. "There. Now everyone knows exactly who you are." The guests, mostly Michelle's friends, though I recognized a few of Thomas's co-workers, shifted uncomfortably. One woman whispered to her husband, but no one intervened. "Barbara, would you mind helping in the kitchen?" Michelle asked sweetly. "The caterer needs an extra hand." The caterer didn't need help. But Michelle needed her audience to see me serving drinks, clearing plates, treated like hired help in my own son's home. Every time I passed, she'd make comments. "Oh, Barbara used to live here, can you believe it? Thomas felt so guilty about his poor mother, he let her stay far too long. She's struggling now, of course. No savings, no plan. Thomas always said she was terrible with money. I offered to let her keep some furniture, but she was too proud. Now she's in that motel with nothing." By the time Derek arrived, yes, Derek, her affair partner, attending a memorial for the man he'd helped poison, I was ready to explode. But I held steady, even when he shook my hand and said, "Sorry for your loss. Michelle says you two weren't close." I was refilling water glasses when I heard Michelle on the phone in the hallway, not realizing I was nearby. "Monday at 2, yes. Cash deal, as discussed. No issues with the title. I'm the sole owner. No, there's no trust or anything complicated. Clean sale. Yes, every penny will be wired to my Cayman account." She was planning to flee the country with the money. I slipped out the back door and called Harold from my car. "She's running. Cayman Islands." "Perfect," he said. "That's federal flight to avoid prosecution. Another charge to add. Monday can't come soon enough." As I drove away, I peeled off the visitor sticker and smiled for the first time in weeks. Come Monday, we'd see who the real visitor was. Sunday morning, Harold called with urgency in his voice. "Barbara, we have a problem. The title company missed the trust in their search. The sale might actually go through if we don't act now." "What do we need?" "More evidence that Michelle knew about the trust before the sale. Without it, she could claim ignorance, maybe get away with just civil penalties instead of criminal charges." That's when I remembered something. Harold, at the party yesterday, she took calls in Thomas's old study. She always does business there. If Thomas was recording things, his surveillance system. "Barbara, you're brilliant, but how do we access it?" I still had my key to the back door, the one Thomas had given me years ago, the one Michelle didn't know existed. Leave that to me. That night, while Michelle was at her Sunday yoga class with Derek, their regular routine Thomas had documented, I let myself into the house. My house, technically, according to the trust. Thomas's study looked different now, but his hidden camera system was still active, the tiny red light blinking behind the bookshelf. He'd shown me once how to access it through his laptop, which Michelle hadn't found because it was disguised as an old cookbook in the kitchen. The recordings were all there, hours of footage, including one from 3 days after Thomas's death. Michelle on the phone with someone. The trust. Yeah, I know about it. Thomas thought he was so clever, but it doesn't matter. The trustee is some cousin named Brian, who probably doesn't even know he's involved. By the time anyone figures it out, I'll be long gone. No, his mother doesn't know anything. She can barely operate a cell phone, much less understand legal documents. Then, the jackpot. A video from the morning Thomas died. Michelle on the phone with Derek. He drank the whole shake this morning. Extra dose, like you said. He'll be dizzy by the time he gets on the highway. Make sure you're ready with your alibi." My hands shook as I copied everything to a flash drive. My son's murder, planned and executed, recorded in his own home. But I wasn't done. In Michelle's bedroom, their bedroom, I found more. Bank statements showing transfers to Derek. A passport with Michelle's photo, but a different name. Rebecca Walsh. A one-way ticket to the Cayman Islands dated for Monday night, right after the closing. Then I saw it. Thomas's wedding ring, the one Michelle claimed was lost in the accident, sitting in her jewelry box next to a pair of Derek's cufflinks. I photographed everything, my phone clicking quietly in the darkness. As I was leaving, I noticed something else. Michelle had already packed. 3 suitcases sat in the closet, ready to go. Back in my motel room, I called Harold. "I have everything. Video of her admitting she knew about the trust, evidence of the poisoning plot, proof she's planning to flee. Barbara, this is incredible. We need to get this to the FBI tonight. There's more. She's already packed. Flights tomorrow night. If the closing happens at 2, she'll be gone by 6. Harold was quiet for a moment. "Then we don't wait for the closing. We intercept her there with law enforcement. Barbara, you've just guaranteed she won't walk away from this." I looked at Thomas's photo on my nightstand, the one thing of his I'd managed to keep. "She won't just not walk away, Harold. She's going to pay for every single thing she's done." "There's something else," Harold said. "The medical examiner wants to reopen Thomas's case based on the toxicology reports. Barbara, they're going to prove it was murder." For the first time since Thomas died, I felt something other than grief and anger. I felt hope. Justice was coming, and it was coming tomorrow at 2 p.m. in a title company office where Michelle thought she was about to get away with everything. "Harold, make sure the FBI brings handcuffs. I want to see them on her wrists." "Oh, they will. Trust me, they will." Monday morning arrived with clear skies, the first sunshine I'd seen since Thomas's death. Harold's conference room was packed. 2 FBI agents, a detective from Denver PD, the district attorney herself, and a forensic accountant who'd spent the night analyzing Michelle's financial crimes. "Mrs. Ingram," Agent Sarah Chen began, "what you've uncovered is extraordinary. We're looking at first-degree murder, wire fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit murder." The district attorney, Patricia Reeves, laid out the plan. "We'll have agents positioned at every exit of the title company. The moment Michelle signs those closing documents, she's committed federal wire fraud. That's when we move." "What about Derek?" I asked. "Already in custody," Detective Morrison replied. "Picked him up at 4 this morning. He's talking, trying to cut a deal. Says it was all Michelle's idea." Harold spread out the trust documents one more time. "Barbara, as the legal trustee, you'll need to present these to stop the sale. Are you prepared for that?" "I've been prepared since I watched that video of my son." Agent Chen pulled up Michelle's photo on her laptop. "She's smart, manipulative. She might try to run when she sees you. That's why you'll enter after she's already signed. We need her to complete the fraud." "What if she claims she didn't know about the trust?" Patricia smiled grimly. "That's why we have her recorded confession saying she knew. Plus, Derek's testimony confirms she knew about it months ago. She's done." Harold's secretary knocked. "The forensic team is here with their report." Dr. James Liu entered, carrying a thick folder. "We've completed the extended toxicology panel on Thomas Ingram's remains. Ethylene glycol levels were lethal. He would have died within hours, even without the accident. The accident actually saved him from a more painful death." My chest tightened. "So she really—" The poisoning began approximately 6 months before his death, small doses escalating over time. Classic antifreeze poisoning pattern. With Derek's confession and the purchase receipts, we can prove premeditation. I thought about Thomas's suffering, how tired he'd looked in that video, how Michelle had watched him deteriorate day by day while playing the devoted wife. "There's more," Dr. Liu continued. "We found defensive wounds on his hands, hidden by the accident trauma. He fought someone off that morning. Derek's DNA was under his fingernails." "Derek was there?" Harold asked, stunned. "Appears so. Probably ensuring Thomas got in the car after the poisoning dose." The room fell silent as we absorbed this. It wasn't just murder. It was an ambush. Agent Chen stood. "It's 12:30. We need to get positioned. Mrs. Ingram, you'll wait in the coffee shop next door. When I text you, you have exactly 2 minutes to get to the conference room." As everyone prepared to leave, Patricia Reeves pulled me aside. "Mrs. Ingram, I want you to know we're going for the maximum sentence. Life without parole. Your son will get justice." Harold drove me to the title company district, my hands steady now, my purpose clear. As we parked, he handed me a folder. "The trust documents, certified copies. When you present these, Michelle will know it's over." What if she tries to lie her way out? She can't. We have everything. The recordings, Derek's confession, the forensic evidence. "Barbara, she's finished." I saw Michelle's white Mercedes pull into the parking lot at 1:45. She looked perfect, as always. Designer suit, fresh manicure, not a hair out of place. She had no idea that FBI agents were watching from 3 unmarked cars, that her passport had already been flagged, that Derek was currently detailing their entire plan to save himself. My phone buzzed at 2:07. "Agent Chen. She's signed. Go now." I stood, straightened my simple black dress, the same one I'd worn to Thomas's funeral, visitor sticker long gone, and walked toward the building. Michelle thought she'd labeled me correctly. She was about to learn that I wasn't a visitor in my son's life or his legacy. I was his mother. I was his avenger. And I was about to reclaim everything she'd stolen. Wow, we've come such a long way together, haven't we? I know many of you are probably holding your breath, waiting to see what happens when I walk into that room. If you're enjoying this story of a mother's fight for justice, please hit that like button. It really does help more people find these stories. And if you know someone who's ever been mistreated by family, someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to stand up for yourself, please share this with them. Sometimes we all need a reminder that the truth has a way of surfacing, no matter how deep someone tries to bury it. Now let me tell you what happened when I walked through that door. The title company's conference room smelled like fresh coffee and Michelle's expensive perfume. She was sitting at the polished table, pen in hand, signing the last document with a flourish. The buyer, a middle-aged man from Texas, was smiling, clearly pleased with his purchase. Michelle looked up when I entered, her face cycling through surprise, annoyance, and then cruel amusement. "Barbara, what are you doing here? This is a private transaction." She turned to the title officer. "Please have security remove this woman. She's been stalking me since my husband's death." I walked calmly to the table and placed my folder down. "Actually, I'm here on official business, as the trustee of the Thomas Ingram Living Trust." Michelle laughed, that tinkling fake laugh she'd perfected. "There is no trust. I have the deed. I showed it to everyone." "You have a quitclaim deed dated April 1st, 2024, I said, opening my folder, "for a property that was transferred to an irrevocable living trust on January 20th, 2024. You can't sell what you don't own, Michelle." The buyer's face went pale. The title officer grabbed the documents I was spreading on the table. "This is ridiculous!" Michelle stood, her voice rising. "The trustee is Brian Ingram, and he doesn't exist. Thomas made it all up." "How would you know the trustee's name if Thomas never told you about the trust?" I asked quietly. The room went silent. Michelle's mouth opened and closed like a fish. "And for the record," I continued, "B. Ingram isn't Brian. It's Barbara. Barbara Ingram. Me." That's when the door opened, and Agent Chen walked in with 3 other FBI agents. "Michelle Foster Ingram, you're under arrest for wire fraud, attempted wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder." "This is insane!" Michelle screamed, backing toward the window. "You can't prove anything!" "Actually," Agent Chen said, pulling out handcuffs, "Derek Walsh has been very cooperative. He's detailed your entire plan, including how you poisoned Thomas over 6 months." Michelle's perfect composure finally cracked. "That lying bastard! It was his idea. He said if Thomas was gone, we could be together, have all his money." "Is that a confession?" Agent Chen asked, as another agent read Michelle her Miranda rights. But I wasn't done. I pulled out my phone and played the recording from Thomas's study. Michelle admitting she knew about the trust, planning to flee the country. "You recorded me in my own home?" she shrieked. "Thomas's home," I corrected. "Thomas's cameras. Installed to catch you poisoning him, documenting everything for 6 months." The buyer was backing toward the door. The title officer was on the phone with her supervisor. Michelle was in handcuffs, her perfect makeup running as reality set in. "You stupid old woman," she hissed at me. "You think you've won? Thomas is still dead." That's when the conference room door opened again, and Thomas walked in. The room exploded. Michelle screamed. The FBI agents stepped back in shock. I nearly collapsed. But it wasn't Thomas. It was his identical twin brother, Timothy, whom we'd kept hidden for 38 years after my ex-husband had threatened to kill him as a baby. The brother Thomas had reconnected with in secret 5 years ago. The brother who'd been living in witness protection in Canada. "Hello, Michelle," Timothy said, his voice exactly like Thomas's. "My brother sent me something before he died. A full confession about what you were doing to him. He knew he might not survive, so he made sure I'd be here to see justice served." Michelle fainted. As the EMTs revived her, Timothy pulled me aside. "I'm sorry for the deception, Mom. Thomas made me promise to stay hidden until the trial. He knew seeing me would break her." I looked at my son, not Thomas, but so much like him it hurt. "You knew? All this time?" "Thomas found me 5 years ago. When he discovered what Michelle was doing, he updated his will, created the trust, and made sure you'd be protected. He said if anything happened to him, I was to come home and help you." Michelle was conscious again, staring at Timothy in horror. "You're dead! I killed you!" "No," Timothy said quietly. "You killed my brother, and now you're going to pay for it." As they led Michelle away, she kept screaming about Thomas being alive, that this was all a trick. The officers thought she'd lost her mind. Only Harold, Timothy, and I knew the truth, that Thomas had one final card to play from beyond the grave. A twin brother Michelle never knew existed, whose DNA would match any evidence she thought she'd destroyed, whose testimony would ensure she never walked free again. Justice isn't always clean or simple. Sometimes it comes disguised as a ghost from the past, wearing your dead son's face and speaking in his voice, his. The FBI interview room was cold and sterile, but Timothy's presence made it bearable. He sat beside me as we explained everything to Agent Chen and District Attorney Reeves, who looked like they'd seen a ghost, which, in a way, they had. "Let me understand this," Patricia Reeves said slowly. "Thomas had an identical twin brother that no one knew about?" Timothy pulled out a folder of documents, birth certificates, adoption papers, court records. "Our father was violently abusive. When Mom was pregnant with us, she didn't know it was twins until delivery. The doctors helped her hide me, registered only Thomas's birth. I was adopted by a family in Canada through a sealed adoption, for my protection. Thomas found me through a DNA ancestry site 5 years ago," Timothy continued. "Right around the time Michelle started her affair. He reached out, we confirmed our connection, and slowly built a relationship in secret." Agent Chen studied the documents. "And Thomas never told Michelle?" "He didn't trust her by then," I explained. "He'd noticed money missing, suspected the affair. He wanted to protect Timothy from whatever she might do." "When Thomas realized Michelle was poisoning him," Timothy said, his voice thick with emotion, "he called me. Made me promise to watch over Mom if anything happened. He documented everything, sent me copies of all the evidence, including videos of Michelle discussing her plans." Patricia leaned forward. "You have additional evidence?" Timothy pulled out another USB drive. "Everything Thomas sent me over 6 months. Financial records showing Michelle stealing from their accounts. Communications with Derek planning the poisoning. Even a recording from the morning Thomas died. Michelle on the phone saying he won't make it to work alive." "My God," Agent Chen whispered. "This is premeditated murder in the first degree." "There's more," Timothy said. "Thomas discovered Michelle had done this before. Her first husband in California died mysteriously in 2017. Antifreeze poisoning ruled as accidental. She inherited everything. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Michelle wasn't just a killer, she was a serial killer. "We'll need to contact California authorities," Patricia said, already reaching for her phone. "This changes everything. We're looking at multiple murder charges across state lines." Harold, who'd been quietly reviewing documents, spoke up. "With Timothy's testimony and evidence, plus Derek's confession, she's looking at life without parole, minimum." "What about the house?" I asked. "The trust?" "Ironclad," Harold assured me. "The house is yours, Barbara. The investments, the life insurance, everything Thomas wanted you to have. Michelle gets nothing except a prison cell." Timothy took my hand. "Mom, is it okay if I call you that? Thomas always called you Mom when we talked." I squeezed his hand, tears flowing freely. "Of course. You're my son, too, even if I couldn't raise you." Agent Chen stood. "Michelle's being processed now. She's still insisting Thomas is alive, that this is all an elaborate hoax. Her lawyer's trying to claim insanity." "She's not insane," Timothy said firmly. "She's a calculating killer who thought she'd found the perfect victim. Thomas proved her wrong." As we prepared to leave, Patricia Reeves pulled me aside. "Mrs. Ingram, I want you to know, we're going to get justice for both of Thomas's victims, your son and Michelle's first husband. Their families deserve closure." Outside the federal building, news vans were already gathering. Someone had leaked that a Denver woman had been arrested for poisoning her husband, that there might be other victims. Timothy and I stood together, looking at the chaos Michelle had created. "What will you do now?" I asked him. "Thomas asked me to look after you," he said. "If you'll have me, I'd like to stay. Get to know the mother I never had the chance to know." "What about your family in Canada?" "My adoptive parents passed years ago. No siblings, no wife. Thomas was my only family, and now you are too." As we walked to Harold's car, I felt something I hadn't experienced since Thomas's death. Hope. Michelle had taken my son, but in her cruelty, she'd revealed another son I never knew I could have. "Thomas would be glad," Timothy said, as if reading my thoughts. "He always said the best revenge against Michelle would be for us to be happy without her." Harold drove us home. To my home, the one Thomas had made sure Michelle could never steal. As we pulled into the driveway, Mrs. Chen from across the street was waiting with a casserole and tears in her eyes. "I saw the news," she said. "I'm so sorry I didn't do more when she threw you out." The neighborhood had seen my humiliation. Now they'd witness my vindication. The courtroom was packed for Michelle's arraignment 3 days later. Media, neighbors, and curious strangers filled every seat. Michelle entered in an orange jumpsuit, her perfect appearance destroyed. No makeup, hair limp, the glamorous mask finally gone. Judge Harrison reviewed the charges. First-degree murder, attempted murder, wire fraud, identity theft, conspiracy to commit murder, and now, with new evidence from California, suspicion of murder in the death of Robert Chen in 2017. Michelle's lawyer, an overworked public defender after her assets were frozen, tried to argue. "Your Honor, my client maintains her innocence. She claims this is an elaborate frame-up involving her supposedly dead husband." The judge looked at the evidence list. Timothy's DNA test confirming he wasn't Thomas, the toxicology reports, Derek's confession, the recordings. Bail is denied. The defendant is a flight risk with a forged passport and a ticket to the Cayman Islands. "That's not mine!" Michelle screamed. "Thomas is alive! He's right there!" She pointed at Timothy, who sat beside me in the gallery. "That is Timothy Ingram," the judge said firmly, "the victim's twin brother, confirmed by DNA testing and Canadian government records. Mrs. Ingram, control yourself or I'll have you removed." District Attorney Reeves stood. "Your Honor, we'd also like to note that Mr. Derek Walsh has agreed to testify against the defendant in exchange for a reduced sentence. He's provided detailed accounts of the poisoning schedule, the defendant's planning, and her previous statements about her first husband's death." Michelle lunged toward Derek's empty chair. "That lying piece of trash! I'll kill him!" "I believe you just made the prosecution's case," Judge Harrison said dryly. "Get the defendant out of my courtroom." As they dragged Michelle away, she kept screaming about Thomas being alive, about this being his revenge. The media ate it up. "Black Widow killer claims dead husband framed her," made every headline. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. One shoved a microphone at me. "Mrs. Ingram, how does it feel to see your daughter-in-law facing justice?" I thought carefully before answering. "She's not my daughter-in-law. She's the woman who murdered my son. And yes, justice feels appropriate." "What about claims that Thomas is still alive?" Timothy stepped forward. "I'm Timothy Ingram, Thomas's twin brother. My brother is dead, murdered by that woman. Any claims otherwise are the desperate lies of a killer facing consequences." That afternoon, Harold called with news. "Barbara, the forensic accountants found more. Michelle had life insurance policies on 3 other men she'd dated. All still alive, thankfully, but all reported mysterious illnesses while with her. Dear God. The FBI is contacting them now. This is bigger than we thought. Michelle's been hunting victims for years." A week later, California authorities confirmed it. Robert Chen's death was murder. Same pattern. Antifreeze poisoning over months, made to look accidental. His family had always suspected, but could never prove it. Robert's sister called me that evening. "Mrs. Ingram, I'm so sorry about Thomas. But thank you. You've given us closure we never thought we'd have." The trial was set for 6 months out, but Michelle's lawyer requested a competency hearing. "My client insists Thomas Ingram is alive and stalking her. She's clearly suffering from delusions." The psychiatric evaluation was thorough. Dr. Margaret Foster, no relation, testified. "Mrs. Ingram is not delusional. She's a narcissistic sociopath attempting to manipulate the system. Her claims about Thomas being alive are calculated lies, not delusions." During the evaluation, Michelle had slipped. When told Timothy's DNA definitively proved he wasn't Thomas, she'd muttered, "Should have made sure there was no body to test." That statement, recorded by the court psychiatrist, sealed her fate. 3 weeks before trial, Derek Walsh was found dead in his cell. Suicide, they said, though everyone suspected Michelle had somehow arranged it. Without Derek, the prosecution worried their case might weaken. They needn't have worried. Michelle's new cellmate, wearing a wire, recorded Michelle bragging about the murders. "2 husbands, would have been 3 if Thomas hadn't hidden that damn trust. You know what's funny? I actually convinced him his mother was toxic. He died thinking she was the problem." When I heard that recording, played in court during pre-trial motions, I broke down. Timothy held me as I sobbed, not for Michelle's cruelty, but for Thomas's last months, poisoned in body and mind. The judge ruled the recording admissible. Michelle's fate was sealed. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Michelle was convicted on all counts: first-degree murder, conspiracy, wire fraud, and thanks to California joining the case, the murder of Robert Chen. Life without parole, consecutive sentences ensuring she'd die in prison. When the verdict was read, Michelle finally broke, sobbing and screaming that it wasn't fair, that Thomas had tricked her. The families of her victims sat together. Robert Chen's family had flown in from California, sitting beside Timothy and me, united in our grief and relief. As they led her away, Michelle turned to me one last time. "You'll never be happy. You know that, right? You'll always be the mother who lost her son." "No," I said firmly. "I'm the mother who got justice for her son, and I'm the mother who found another son I never knew I had." 6 months after the trial, Timothy and I stood in Thomas's study, now restored to how he'd kept it. We were establishing the Thomas Ingram Foundation for Domestic Abuse Survivors, funded by the life insurance and investments Thomas had protected in the trust. "He'd be proud," Timothy said, looking at Thomas's photo on the desk. "He is proud," I corrected. "Wherever he is, he knows we did this for him." The doorbell rang. It was Harold with final paperwork and unexpected news. "Barbara, Timothy, you need to see this. The FBI found something in Michelle's storage unit." He handed us a journal. Michelle's handwriting, dating back 10 years. Page after page of plans, schemes, notes about potential victims. Thomas's name appeared 2 years before they met, with notes. Perfect target, isolated from family, significant assets, vulnerable to affection. She hunted him, I whispered. But he outsmarted her, Harold reminded me. In the end, Thomas won. That evening, the neighbors threw a welcome home party for both Timothy and me. Mrs. Chen made her famous dumplings, the Johnsons brought beer, and for the first time since Thomas's death, the house felt alive again. "I need to tell you all something," I said, standing in my living room. My living room, no longer Michelle's. "I'm sorry for the isolation of the past few years. Michelle convinced Thomas I was difficult, and I was too proud to fight it. I should have reached out." "Barbara, no," Mrs. Chen said firmly. "We should have seen what was happening. We failed you and Thomas both." "No one failed anyone," Timothy said. "Michelle was a master manipulator. She fooled everyone, even Thomas for a while. But he figured it out, and he made sure Mom would be okay. That's what matters." As the party wound down, Janet pulled me aside. "You look different, Barbara. Stronger." "I am stronger. I spent so many years trying to keep the peace, not make waves, be the good mother who didn't interfere." Michelle saw that as weakness. But Thomas knew better. He knew I'd fight when it mattered. A year later, on the anniversary of Thomas's death, Timothy and I visited his grave together. The headstone now read, "Thomas Michael Ingram, beloved son, brother, and hero. He fought until the end." "I have something to tell you," Timothy said. "I've been offered a job here in Denver, pediatric surgeon at Children's Hospital. I want to stay if you'll have me." "This is your home," I said simply. "It always has been, even when we didn't know it." That evening, we hosted the first annual Thomas Ingram Foundation Gala. We raised $100,000 for domestic abuse survivors, specifically those dealing with financial abuse and coercive control. Robert Chen's sister gave a speech about recognizing the signs of slow poisoning. I spoke about the importance of trusting your instincts when something feels wrong. "My son Thomas taught me something vital," I told the crowd. "Sometimes the greatest act of love is preparing for the worst while hoping for the best." He couldn't save himself, but he made sure his death would mean something: justice, truth, and protection for others. As I stood there surrounded by supporters with Timothy by my side, I realized Michelle had been wrong about one thing. I wasn't just the mother who lost her son. I was the mother who honored his memory by refusing to let his killer win. Sometimes, I concluded my speech, playing dead is the only way to truly live. Thomas knew that. He played the long game, and in the end, love won. The crowd erupted in applause, but I barely heard it. I was thinking about Thomas, hoping he knew that his mother had finally learned to fight back, to set boundaries, to choose herself. He would have been so proud. Thank you for joining me on this journey from loss to justice. If this story inspired you to stand up for yourself or someone you love, please leave a comment saying, "I choose me." Your stories of strength give me hope every day. If you want to hear more stories about the power of resilience and the triumph of truth over deception, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Remember, you deserve respect, no matter what anyone says or does. Trust your instincts, document everything, and never forget, sometimes the longest game is the winning game. Until next time, this is Barbara, reminding you to always check the trust, both literally and figuratively.